Good evening. Welcome to today's meeting of the Governance and Ethics Committee. I'm Councillor Tom Marino, the Chairman of the committee. Before we start, I would like to explain for the benefit of the members of the public who may be watching that today's meeting is being held both over Zoom with councillors present and COVID compliant in the council chamber. I can confirm that those present in the chamber are sitting socially distanced and are thus permitted to remove their face masks whilst seated. In addition to myself, the other members of the committee in attendance are Councillors Jeremy Cottam, the Vice Chairman, Jeff Beck, Rick Jones, Tony Linden, Steve Masters, Jeff Mays, Andy Moore and Claire Rolls. We also have Parish Council representatives on the committee, Councillors Bill Graham from Shore-cum-Donington Parish Council and David Southgate from Buckbury Parish Council. Parish councillors are permitted to speak at the meeting, but they are not permitted to vote on the items. Joseph Holmes, Sarah Clark and Shannon Coleman Slaughter are the officers who will be advising the meeting. Gordon Oliver is in attendance as the clerk to the meeting and the Zoom host. Do members have any questions about the way in which the meeting will be conducted before we proceed? Okay, great. So we'll move on to item 1, which is apologies. Gordon, have we received any apologies?
Councillor David Marsh has given us apologies and substituting is Councillor Steve Masters.
Great, thanks, Gordon. So moving on to item 2, the minutes. So we have the minutes from our previous meeting. Are members willing to accept the minutes of the previous meeting as a true and accurate record? Councillor Linden, so you got your hand up.
Yes, Chairman, I sent you an email and also the officers as well, correcting the third paragraph in terms of what I raised in correction of the meeting on the previous meeting, not the held on the 26th of July 2021. What I wanted was the date of the creation of the district council, not the unitary council. The district council in 1998 took over the powers of Berkshire County Council after it was abolished in 1998 and became a unitary council. And also, I also asked about leaving out a quarter of our population as well. So I just wanted to correct those minutes because obviously the minutes were corrected for the last minute, but they were inaccurate for what I actually said, Jim.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Linden.
So maybe I can get an answer for that from.
Yeah, I'll go to Councillor Beck, and then if anyone wants to comment on that, on both, then we can. Jeff.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. It does not record my apology for not being able to attend the meeting. I did actually sort of submit it in writing. We've upset that.
Exactly.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, do any of the officers want to come back to those two?
Thank you, Chairman. I will note Councillor Beck's apologies and apologies that wasn't on the minutes. In terms of Councillor Linden's query, it was my understanding that had been resolved, but certainly we can take that up. And I think I can see Joseph has raised his hand and he may wish to comment on that further.
Yeah, Joseph, you want to come in?
Yeah, thanks very much, Chairman. And yes, we'll pick that up in the final set of the financial statements, which hopefully will come before you in future meetings to approve.
So, Chairman, just to ask that obviously on the previous stuff, that will also be corrected if need be, I presume, Joseph. So I'll leave that with you. And if you can give me an update on those two with the manager concerned, that would be great. And let the chairman know as well as Sarah Clark. Thank you.
Okay, great. So with those comments and concerns taken on board.
Councillor Rolls has raised.
Okay, Councillor Rolls, sorry.
Sorry, Chair. Just one point I wanted to raise. So I think we had a brief discussion on where it noted people present in the room and then on Zoom. It's just a small point, but it says councillors present and also present. I think we should distinguish whether people are physically present here or on Zoom. Otherwise, I think there still remains confusion as to who's actually in the room. But it's only a small point and I'm happy to be overruled.
Sorry, Chairman, I think it's a valid point, and it certainly relates to legal requirements regarding attendance. So it is something that we're looking at. We've had a number of vacancies in that team, but we will be resolving that to make it as clear as possible. It was also discussed at the last Constitution Review Task Group meeting. So it is something that we're aware of, and we'll make sure that it is fully addressed to members' satisfaction.
So sorry, just for clarity, are we going to actually put also present virtually or via Zoom? How are we going to address that?
Yeah, so I think we're looking at the options, but it may be that it will be virtual attendance, virtually present. So it will be very clear, and whether that's by the members' names, because of course the members of the committee are listed separately to others, and others may be attending in person. So I think we just need to find the way that most clearly and accurately and efficiently represents who is in the room and who is zooming in.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks for that. Does anyone else in the room have any more comments on it before we move on from this? Can't see anyone. So with those comments and concerns taken on board, can I have a proposer and a seconder for the minutes on the meeting holds for 7th of September? So proposed. Thank you, Councillor Jones. So can members indicate by raising their hand whether they agree that the minutes can be signed as a true and accurate record?
Okay.
Thank you, Chairman. I can confirm that vote has been carried.
Great, thank you. I'll sign those at some point soon. So move on to item 3, declarations of interest. Gordon, have we had any declarations of interest?
We haven't received any in advance of the meeting.
Okay, and are there any from the floor before we move on? Okay, can't see any. So move on to item 4, the forward plan. So officers, members, are there any amendments that you'd like made to the forward plan? Clara, is that an old Zoom hand or is that a new? Okay, so I'll take Councillor Rolls and I'll take Councillor Moore.
Thank you, Chair. It's actually a small point which I'm happy to take offline, but the member request for access to information, which was something I asked to be put on the forward plan. Can I take up with Sarah afterwards the format of that, how that will be dealt with and presented at the committee? Because I've never actually raised this before, so I'm not clear.
I'm happy to have a conversation either after the meeting today or otherwise by email.
Great, thank you.
Great, thank you. Councillor Moore, I think you had your hand up.
Yes, thank you, Chair. In the minutes, Sarah is minuted as noting my request for something to come to the December meeting about the Constitution Task Group report. Now, the forward plan doesn't start till next January. Or until January. So I don't know whether there is, I can't remember, is there a meeting in December? Or is this?
I believe the next meeting's in January, but I'm sure Sarah can be more precise. Right,
okay. Then in which case, in a sense, that's been overtaken by events because there's an item on the agenda tonight.
Yes, so certainly the item tonight is intended to cover as an update and the other outstanding items that we need to bring forward for March.
Right. Okay, thank you.
Clear. Councillor Beck.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm just wondering what item.
Sorry, Jeff, do you have your microphone on?
Yeah. I'm just wondering what item 5 actually relates to. Council.
Jeff, I think your mic still might be off. There we go.
Is that on? Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
I'm referring to item 5. Is it possible we can tell a little bit more about this, what it is?
Yes, so Councillor Beck, under the Constitution, if a member has been denied access to information that they've requested, they can ask that the Governance and Ethics Committee consider their request for information if they think that it's been unreasonably withheld, for example. So we've received that request for information and the Constitution states that it comes here for consideration.
Okay, thank you.
Great. Councillor Rolls, I see your hand up again.
Yeah, just to add to that, I'd like to just make the point that it relates to SIL, access to information relating to SIL cases, which have been well publicised in the media. And also, I think, we are very much aware of it. So it's in relation specifically to that. But I'd also like the wider point around members' access debated and discussed, because I think it's a really, really important point.
Thank you.
Thanks for that. I can't see any more hands virtually or in the room, so I think the forward plan has just been noted, I believe, Sarah. So we'll move on to item 5, which is the external audit appointment process for financial years 2023, 24 to 2027, 28. I believe Shannon is going to introduce this report for us.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, this report sets out the proposals for appointing our external auditors from 23-24 onwards for a 5-year period. The recommendation is that we accept public sector audit appointments' invitation to opt into their sector-led procurement exercise. The report goes through the key sections, be 4.1, where we set out our requirement to appoint an external auditor, 4.2, which sets out the parameters in which that external auditor operates, and 4.4 and 6.5 that sets out the benefits of opting into the sector-led procurement exercise. And I was open to comments and questions.
Great, thank you, Shannon. Do any members wish to speak on this item? You can immediately see Councillor Cotton with your hand up first.
I think.
Okay, fine, we'll go Councillor Linden first.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, I would be fully supporting this motion. It was discussed at Audit and Governance, which I was chairing on the 20th of October for the Royal Berkshire Fire Authority. It gives us great negotiating powers because we're just a small authority if we go in concert with others. And it allows us to have some control over the accounts. We've had delays on pensions. We've also had problems in terms of increased costs for audit and additional costs being put off, certainly on the Fire Authority, for non-existent work that we don't need. Well, it's legal work, but we don't actually require it in terms of the audit process. So I think we have a great degree of strength going on this rather than doing it on our own, Chairman. So I will be fully supporting this.
Great, thank you, Councillor Linden. Councillor Cotton.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Basically, I think I concur with Councillor Linden. This is a sensible route to go down. I have one question, though. How many auditors are on the list that are provided by the government? I mean, if it's only a few of the big boys and nobody else on that list, I think we should be a little bit cautious. Thank you.
Does anyone want to respond to that before we move on to any other comments, or do you want to just wrap up at the end potentially? Sarah? Okay, so we'll move on to Councillor Rolls next.
Thanks. So my first question is, how does this sit with our procurement process under the Constitution? So does that conflict against our Constitution? And secondly, and forgive me if it's in the report, but could I just have a bit of greater understanding around the cost savings?
Okay, thank you, Councillor Rolls, and we'll take Councillor Moore next.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I think I got to the answer myself, but I just like some clarification. Para 4.4, I think it's maybe just the way the English works. It says the council has very limited influence over the nature of the audit services. Therefore, the recommended approach. And my first reading of that was, well, if we're terribly constrained in what we can do, why is this the recommended approach? I think I read it, and it would be useful to just get clarification that the whole framework, presumably coming out of the legal situation, constrains how the nature of the audit service and the National Audit Appoint scheme just fits within that. And just like clarification of that, please.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Moore. Joseph, I can see you want to come in. Oh, sorry, Joseph. Sorry, Joseph. We'll take Councillor Beck, and then if you want to come in, just in case anything you can address comes up, then Councillor Beck.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm not sure that anybody has actually formally proposed the acceptance of the recommendation. Therefore, I'm very happy to propose it or second it if somebody else has already proposed it.
Okay, great.
I'm quite happy to propose it, so I'll accept Joseph.
Okay, great. Well, we'll let Joseph come in before we move on to that, and see if anyone else wants to come before we move to that. Joseph.
Yeah, thanks very much, Chairman. I'll try and answer those questions. I saw Shannon chip in as well if I give the incorrect response. But looking at the appointed auditors at the moment in the current financial year, there are about 5 audit firms, so BDO, Deloitte, Ernst & Young, Grant Thornton, who are our external auditors, and Mazars as well. I think as part of this process, the PSAA, which is part of the Local Government Association, are trying to encourage more audit firms to engage and trying to get some of the larger firms to work with sort of new, smaller firms to be part of that. But there is quite a small pool of audit firms out there to appoint from. To pick up the question around cost and on our procurement processes, so this is why this will end up going to full council at next month, because it is a different kind of procurement process. But by working with the local government association, it's fine from our constitution point of view. By working through them to appoint them on our behalf. Indeed, before 2015, in the abolition of the Audit Commission, all external appointments, all external audit appointments were done on our behalf through the Audit Commission. This is not a particularly sort of new process for appointing external auditors. And cost-wise, very pertinent question at the moment. Our external audit fees have been going down over recent years. That you'll see through a paper coming here to your next meeting. The external audit fees are starting to go back up again. So that competition has forced audit fees down substantially. So there's been a really significant reduction. But I would suspect that they're not going to go down much more, if at all. I expect even through this process, they're more likely to increase because there's more pressure on the external auditors through the Financial Reporting Council and other regulators to get external auditors to do more work on our set of financial statements rather than less. But we have to see. I mean, certainly the process so far has definitely driven down external audit fees. I just don't know how much more they can be driven down compared to where they are at the moment, given how substantially lower they are if you look back over the last 10 years.
Great, thanks, Joseph. Shannon, I don't know if there's anything you want to add to what Joseph has said.
I will just pick up on Councillor Moore's point on 4.4. Yes, it is the structure of the English in the paragraph that you pointed out. So I will acknowledge that and I will amend it before it goes to council so it reads better.
Great, thank you, Shannon. Does anyone else in the room want to make any more comments? Yeah, I can see Councillor Rolls.
Yeah, just going back to Joseph on the cost point, presumably we will be doing some more detailed cost analysis, I'm assuming, but when it goes to full council.
Joseph, you want to come back on that?
No, so we will have no control over what the cost is through going through this process, only that it's highly likely that it will be much cheaper to go through the PSAA than it would be to go it alone, because we wouldn't tap into that economies of scale that we could get. The other cost as well that we would have is that if we went and did this ourselves, we would have to set up a separate committee away from the Governance and Ethics Committee. So then we would have the officer time and potentially then remuneration of independent people who were not councillors, and to try and get them to then join a separate committee as well when you're selecting from kind of the same list that the PSAA do. So no, we won't know the costs until next year.
Okay, I've got Councillor Cottam again.
Thank you. Just really coming back onto this, I'm quite concerned that this is anti-competitive, basically closing out a lot of other firms, unless I'm reassured that these other firms are not seriously qualified to do this. Because, and I like what I heard from Mr. Holmes, is that the bigger companies are being tried to persuade them to actually include some of the four smaller companies. But I even need edges on legality of competition laws. To say, right, this is a selected club. We're not going to allow anybody else to quote. I'm seriously concerned about this.
Yeah, Joseph, you want to come back on that?
Yeah, thank you, Chairman, and Councillor. Absolutely accept the point. The issue is that the Financial Reporting Council set out those firms who can be registered to undertake local audits. So it's not with our remit to determine who they are. We just have to ensure that one of them has to be appointed as our external auditor. So what we couldn't do is run our own procurement and appoint any local firm. They have to be one of the ones that are registered by the Financial Reporting Council.
Okay. Thank you.
And I've got Councillor Linden again.
Yes, as I said earlier, I totally concur with Joseph Holmes on this. It's also important to making sure that whoever we appoint has the ability to do the job as well in terms of getting themselves in order so they can run the accounts on time. And this actually ensures it by going with a grouping, and it's gone through the legal system of other local authorities, including the Royal Berkshire Fire and Rescue Service, and they're quite as tight as we are to making sure that we follow the rules and do it properly. So in that, Chairman, I would like to recommend to Council that we fully accept the officer's recommendation.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Linden. I can't see any more hands in the room. So yeah, I obviously note that Councillor Linden, you said you were happy to propose, and Councillor Beck to second. So we've got the proposal and the second of the recommendation that the Council accepts the public sector audit appointments invitation to opt into the sector-led option for the appointment of external auditors to principal local government and police bodies for 5 financial years from the 1st of April 2023. So I'd ask all members to vote on the recommendation by raising their hand. All in favour?
Thank you, Chairman. I can confirm that's been carried.
Great, thank you, Sarah. So we'll move on to item 6, updates to the Constitution. And I think it's you, Sarah, who's going to introduce this for us.
Thank you, Chairman. This report has a number of proposals which will go on to be considered by Council in December. The report does serve in part, as Councillor Moore referred to earlier, regarding an update of the Constitution Review Task Group and the work that's been going on there, and notes the significant contribution by the members of that task group to date, and all the work that has gone into that. There is a significant redrafting of the Constitution that's being undertaken, and the purpose of this report coming forward at this stage is that there were a number of issues at last year's Budget Council meeting that we wanted to seek to address, and in order to have any changes in place for the Budget Council meeting, that needed to be approved by Council in December. So the purpose of the report, we're proposing an additional Council meeting in March each year, and we're proposing that the meeting currently scheduled for the 3rd of March 2022 is limited to purely budget items. The purpose of the report is also to consider some responses to two motions that have been submitted by Councillor Dillon, and then there are a number of minor amendments to the Constitution. The proposals developed for the Budget Council meeting, that there was a proposal that was developed, and that went to the Constitution Review Task Group. I believe that was last week or the week before. And the first proposal basically proposed a very, very structured procedure at Council, whereby each of the budget items would be allocated a specific amount of time, and each of the groups would then be allocated a proportionate amount of time according to political balance to debate the budget proposals and any proposed amendments. The Constitution Review Task Group considered that the proposal was far too rigid. That proposal, the original proposal, is fully detailed in Appendix C, but the Constitution Review Task Group felt that that was too rigid a proposal and wanted a softer option. And it was considered that a pre-meeting between the Chairman of Council, the leaders of the three political groups and the portfolio holder for finance would assist in people being able to understand prior to the actual meeting any concerns that might come up and help the chairman then in the management of the meeting. Both of those, or both proposals, include a provision to ensure that a member who has seconded an amendment will always be given an opportunity to speak in the event of a closure motion. That was something that was highlighted last year as an issue. There is also a provision proposed for in either scenario whereby the proposer of an amendment can request that there be separate votes on part of the amendment, and that will be a matter for the Chairman of Council to determine, subject to any comments from the statutory officers. In addition, the report is proposing a theme debate. So this is a proposal that came out of a meeting between the leaders and the former chief executive. So what is currently proposed is that at each September meeting, there be a theme debate between the groups. There are a number of guidelines proposed for that within the report. And I had proposed that there would be no member questions at the September council meeting. There will always be a meeting of executive also in September. But again, the Constitution Review Task Group felt that that was too drastic. And so the proposal now recommends, doesn't include that, but what was discussed is that only urgent questions should come forward during that September meeting where we're having the theme debate. In terms of the motions, there was a motion, the first motion, which was submitted by Councillor Dillon some time ago. So that was actually July 2019, and that had been referred to the Constitution Review Task Group. And clearly some time has passed since then. There were two parts to the first motion. The first was around questions and proposing extensions to the time limit. The report includes, we did some benchmarking against other authorities, and actually we allow a similar amount of time to other authorities or more. And we also don't limit the questions to agenda items, which some authorities do. I think what's also important now, and what we've noted is the amount of online engagement also takes place now. So we do Ask Lynn sessions where members of the public can engage online, and also the webinars. So the technology that's been deployed during COVID has given additional mediums by which that engagement can take place. So it's not recommended that there be or that part of the motion be accepted. In terms of the petitions, again, it is not recommended that we accept the recommendation. It was considered that actually there is already scope within the Constitution to enable some of that to be achieved. But what was agreed following the discussion at the Constitution Review Task Group is that officers would update the advice on the website so that people were clear if they wanted the council to be able to consider part only of a motion, that the wording was appropriate and that the wording would enable the council to do that. So that's something that officers will take away. And then in terms of the close of debate, there was the second motion was submitted asking that the guillotine in effect be removed. So at the moment, the council's constitution enables meetings to be extended beyond 10 p.m, but only as far as 10:30 and only if the business can be concluded, and it can't be extended beyond that. It's not recommended that we accept this. Prior to the guillotine being adopted, there had been planning meetings that literally started at 6:30 at night. People came back to the offices the next morning and that meeting was still going on the following day. I think that there are clearly then health and safety considerations for officers, for members and for members of the public attending those meetings if we're expecting them to go on through the night. I think we talk about inclusivity, having meetings that go on through the night. I think I would challenge whether that's fully inclusive. I think also that the quality perhaps of decisions would start to wane. There's lots of members who are working full time as well, and actually our ability to function will more than likely decline if we go on till the early hours. Again, following the debate in the Constitution Review Task Group, it was agreed that the chairman should be given a discretion at full council only to enable the debate to go on up to 15 minutes more at full council. So that guillotine is slightly extended for full council only. Finally, there are a number of minor further constitution amendments, one of which is to enable the external auditors to make representations to this committee without the need to amend standing orders on every occasion. I think we're one of the few authorities that go through that process. So that's just to make that as a standing change. And then a further delegation to myself as monitoring officer to enable me to make changes to the Constitution to reflect changes to the structure of the organisation. So I think in summary, that is the report that's before members tonight. Members are asked to consider whether they want to go for the option C, which is the very rigid structure for the Budget Council meeting, or the softer option, Appendix D. Thank you, Chairman.
Great, thank you, Sarah. Can already see a fair few hands. Before I go to the members in the room, as the chair of the Constitution Review Task Group, Councillor Bridgman, is there anything you want to add to what Sarah's just told us?
Chairman, thank you. No, not particularly. I mean, what I would point out to members is that, and other members of the task group, for example, Councillor Moore will no doubt back me up. This has been a long process, and we spent a long time considering these issues, and I hope that members will see that some serious thought has gone into trying to resolve what were considered to be issues with process. I would say, I mean, this is, as the report makes clear, there are some permanent proposals, that's the audit one and what Sarah was saying about minor amendments, and some proposals purely for the budget meeting next year, with the intention that those proposals are likely to form part of the overall overhaul of the Constitution that's coming forward. But we did want just to put them in for next year to deal with the budget meeting next year initially. And finally, just to anticipate one thing that Sarah and I have been talking about. Sarah was talking about allowing external audit to speak to governance and ethics without having to go through the rigmarole of suspending standing orders. And I see some force in having that ability for other meetings. For example, when the taxi trade wants to speak to licensing, it would be far easier if the chairman could just invite them to speak than going through vote on suspending standing orders, bring them into the room, have a conversation, then vote to restore standing orders. So there are conversations going on to try to make the Constitution more flexible in those circumstances. And I, as will Sarah, no doubt Sarah will be, am very happy to take part in any discussion you want to have about the specifics, because obviously I was chairing the meeting that came to the conclusions that you see reported before you.
Great, thank you, Councillor Bridgman. I've got Councillor Linden first.
Thank you, Chairman. I would concur with the motion submitted by Councillor Lee Dillon that I'm not in favour of either. What I would say, and I would agree with Mrs. Clark, that we can't have these sorts of meetings going on till the middle of the night and next day. I did speak to somebody in this room, and it was suggested, because I wasn't very happy what happened at last year's meeting. I think obviously there should be time for hearing amendments, but we also need to listen to the administration's budget in full as well, and there was some filibustering. In my view, and certainly one could hold, if we don't decide, and this is the first time it's ever happened, in my then 33 years on the council that we were struggling by the end of the evening to complete the debate. If the worst thing came out, then we could hold a meeting 2 days later to do a budget meeting. But it really is the responsibility of members to give enough time, not only for the amendments, but also for the administration budget, so it can be properly scrutinised. I think there is also other areas. I've got no problems with a separate budget meeting, but I think proposal 1 on a stricture of 30 minutes on the first 2 items, which normally don't take that long, and only 45 minutes for the capital and revenue budget, I don't think would be wise. And I think we would generally require more time to discuss it, certainly the capital strategy and the revenue budget if need be, especially if there are amendments as such. I've got no problem with the theme debates. Where I do have an issue is meetings. I understand, speaking to other Berkshire authorities, that they are getting people in a room for council meetings. And while it's nice to have streaming and all the rest of it, I think it is important. I know we have a limit of 30 people in this chamber, but if not, we could meet elsewhere. And the Royal Berkshire Fire Authority, for instance, for just 20 members, met at the New Thiel Community Fire Station. And they had a camera so it could be recorded on YouTube at a later date. I think it is vital that members have the right to attend, have the right to vote. And I think just in case it is ever challenged, that is a safeguard as such. So I think it's more important that members have the right to turn up and the right to vote rather than indicative votes and not turning up unless they choose not to, for a variety of reasons, to do things on Zoom. But I do think we now need to move in a safe environment for members to be able to vote at full council meetings and to fully attend. And it's something I believe very strongly, Chairman. I know it might upset a few people, but I think it needs to be said, Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. And then I've got Councillor Masters next.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, I think that this whole debate has been precipitated by the changing complexion of the council. With this administration, very much in the past, it was a two-party administration where you had the ruling group and the opposition. Now we have a third party in the room, and it was very much a case of that the amendments were voted for en bloc, representing either side of the political argument. What we found last year was that amendments from different parties found some support across the council, on an individual basis, and many members across this council felt that they would have voted in favour of one or two of the amendments here and there, and the block vote didn't allow that. And I think that that's something that we should be looking at moving forward. And I know that the leader of the council stated to members that certainly the minority group leader, that there was a process of engaging in the budgetary planning and the budget process ahead of the meeting, but that's yet to have been disclosed as far as I'm aware. I favour the implementation of a dedicated budget meeting and minimising any extra agenda items to make sure that we do have, and I agree with Councillor Linden that we should be making sure that all members have the ability to vote on it. So, having everybody in the chamber, wherever that chamber may be, is probably a priority. And I would agree with Councillor Linden on that. It needs to be something that's debated across the whole of the council. So, those are my concerns. And I think, they're echoed across all three parties.
Thank you, Councillor Masters. I've got Councillor Rolls next.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, just following on from that, actually, on the block amendment point, I think there is enormous merit in actually having the ability to vote on specific amendments, and I found myself quite conflicted sometimes when I did want to do that, but obviously it wasn't. I wasn't unable to do that because I was effectively block voting on other amendments. So I think that's something that should be looked at. I totally favour a separate meeting for the budget, and I welcome that. I think that's an entirely appropriate and sensible way forward based on the experience that we had last year. And also to thank the task force, because I appreciate this is a no mean feat to go through the detail, and also to welcome the sort of flexibility around having two proposals, which I think is very helpful. And actually, particularly Sarah, talking through how you've discussed, how you've sort of framed it, and then what considerations you've taken to come to sort of conclusions and recommendations. So I welcome that. Just wanted to also say on the themed items, it's something that I sit on the Thames Valley Police and Crime Panel, and we have themed items at every single meeting, and it's incredibly helpful. And I think it really focuses key topics for the public as well to be debated. So, and I think the process around deciding those has been thought through as well. So I welcome that. The only other thing I finally wanted to mention is the point that I think was raised in connection with going on beyond 10:30 at night. Whilst I totally agree with Sarah's comments, I think we have to be mindful that in our Parliament, that doesn't happen. So actually what we're saying is that, those comments, actually we're saying, is there an argument that our own Parliament shouldn't go on into the early hours and indeed all night? So the points raised, I think we need to be a little bit mindful of that. But also just on that point, I think I also concur that we should be looking and seeking to have all members present at full council meetings moving forward. Our Parliament is packed to the rafters in the chamber, and it's acceptable for them. I think it should be acceptable for us now. And I find that we should be moving certainly for full council. Whether that's the same for committees may be another matter for debate. But I don't feel indicative voting is enough for full council, particularly on the budget. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Roswell. Councillor Jones.
Thank you, Chairman. I too am very happy with the general direction of these proposals. I understand the motivation. I too applaud the committee for spending a long time and trying to be as innovative as possible and trying to resolve the issues of the last budget meeting. Of the options, option one is obviously clearer, so that everyone would enter the debate knowing exactly what we're facing. Option two, I guess, is more flexible. It does involve leaders cooperating before the budget, which I think is a very good thing. And it has the ability to extend the meeting. In terms of the cut-off time, at the moment, as I understand it, we vote to extend the meeting beyond 10 o'clock to 10:30. This is proposing a further 15 minutes at the chairman's discretion. It seems to me that what we perhaps ought to do to make it even simpler is to allow us to go to 10:30 anyway, without a necessity and a time wasting for a vote. But I applaud the idea of the chairman having a 15-minute discretion. To have two potential extensions seems unnecessarily complex to me. The only other comment I've got is in the table, which is, I think, at 5.25 in the report. Effectively, the control of time between political parties is required, whether we have a fixed set of debate times as it's disclosed in 524, or whether we agree it beforehand, we still have that requirement. I think we need to look at that as to how the chairman of the meeting, and I've got a personal interest here, would actually manage that. I can see that actually being extremely difficult to manage and count how much time each party is speaking at a time. I understand the principle behind it. I'm not sure how manageable in practice that would be. So I need to do think about that.
Thank you, Councillor Jones. I've got Councillor Cottam. I can see Councillor Lynn's got his hand up again, but I can also see that Graham Bridgman has been very patient. So I'll let him come in after Councillor Cottam, and then if there are any further comments from members in the room.
Chairman, if I may, I'm very happy to come in after all members of the committee have spoken, because I may try to wrap some stuff up that you've been discussing. Okay, no problem. Thank you, Councillor Bridgman. So Councillor Cottam.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I support Councillor Jones on the issue of the timing. 10:30, why are we going to do a second vote? I think 10:30 is not an arduous time to finish a meeting. And if there are some things to be, dot the I's and cross the T's, then that should be allowed by the chairman. I have great confidences in our chairman. I was a chairman of West Berkshire District Council. I think it's exceedingly important for the chairman to govern the meeting, not to have a rigid straitjacket applied. It really it takes the whole D out of democracy. We need to be able to have a good discussion, and with the chairman, that should be applied. I really cannot support proposal 1. I have confidence in the people that we have appointed here as senior councillors, as chairman, to take this on board and to actually govern the meeting properly. I mean, with the further additional having a discussion amongst leaders of the groups and decide on what is the important things to do in that meeting. I would even be a little bit more radical than that, and you could even postpone the meeting and have it another day. But that's maybe a wish for a later date. But because this, as I said, this committee has done a huge amount of work. I did actually have a word with Councillor Jeff Brooks about this, and his understanding was that the view of that committee was that proposal 1 wouldn't work, and really we should only really be seriously looking at proposal 2. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Cottam. Before I move to Councillor Linden, Councillor Jones, is that an old hand that's still up on my screen, the Zoom hand?
Yes, it's an old hand.
Great, thank you. Councillor Linden.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I wholly agree with Councillor Rolls. I think all council meetings do need members having a full vote rather than indicative vote. I would agree with Councillor Jones and also Councillor Cottam about option 2 or proposal 2, because proposal 1 I think is just too rigid. But again, I think if we want to go well beyond 10:30, if things are that desperate, then we should hold a meeting very shortly afterwards to suspend the meeting and to carry on. So we're not stringing on like some councils do, including Woking Borough Council, heroically into the early hours of the morning. And I agree again with what Mrs. Clark has said. It's up to members to making sure we can do the business. Obviously, there are amendments, not only from the Democrats, but also from the Greens as well. And I know the meeting slightly backfired on Councillor Dillon last year, but it's how members cooperate. But we also need to have adequate time for the budget meeting in terms for the administration as well. So the public can know what we're doing and what's being discussed, not just spending time on other motions. I know there's an election coming up in 2023, but it is vital that we do things properly in the right sort of time. We've done it in the past, and I've got a lot of sympathy for Councillor Parsker's chairman last year, who was put in a very, very difficult and challenging situation. It's up to us councillors to be responsible. Thanks, Chairman.
Councillor Moore.
Thank you, Chairman. And I've sort of resisted speaking because I'm a member, as Councillor Bridgman has noted, of the task group, and been actively involved in developing arrangements for the budget meeting, as we noted from the forward plan. I also participated in the discussion in the task group. I do wonder now whether option one really needs to go forward from this paper into the full council. I think there's a consensus that option two, in the way of controlling the debate, is the one that we want to put forward. I am confident about that we will manage the time much better this year. I just do wonder whether the revenue budget, which is the biggie, let's face it, it's the one with the council tax vote at the end of it, necessarily needs to come right at the end of the four items, and that the chairman might also have the flexibility to move that up the agenda if it looks appropriate. Thank you.
Yeah, well, Councillor Masters again.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, I was just about to echo what Councillor Moore said, and I would probably like to propose that we vote on option two being something that we put forward to the council, notwithstanding any comments by Councillor Redmond. But I would be happy to propose option two.
Okay, I've got Joseph and Councillor Bridgman. Obviously, Councillor Bridgman's had his hand up for a while, so I'll let Graham come in first.
Chairman, thank you, members, for the debate. I think just to pick up a few of the points that were made, clearly the thrust of the paper is to give over this particular meeting in March wholly to the budget, and you can work out how much of the previous meetings have been taken up with non-budget stuff. On the question of closure, I would point out that the thrust of the Constitution is to finish meetings by 10 o'clock. Moving to 10:30 is in extremis, generally speaking, because you haven't finished the agenda, but the chairman thinks you will be able to finish the entire agenda by 10:30. And therefore, I would suggest that in those circumstances, and I hear what you say about 10:30 not being unreasonable, and I'll come back to the parliamentary point in a moment, that giving the chairman that final say to say, well, we haven't quite finished the debate on this item, therefore we will extend the meeting to finish that item, is fine. Joseph will comment, but I believe that all four of these items need to be debated and agreed upon at the budget meeting, in order that Joseph can then do whatever he does with the numbers after the meeting and crunch whatever he needs to crunch and produce the budget. And that therefore you'll recall that the budget meeting last year finished, I think, at 10:28 from memory. And Joseph made it very clear that had it not done so, we would have been back in the chamber very soon after on an adjournment in order to conclude the business. And I would far prefer to conclude the business of the budget on the evening than have to come back again and start again. On the parliamentary point and on the everyone in the room point, I mean, clearly that is outside the nature of this paper. This paper is not talking about the nature of the number in the chamber, whether it's for a council meeting or for a board or for a committee. But what I would say, and Mrs. Clark can comment on this one, is that in the discussions we've had about how to run meetings, it has been very much driven by health and safety. Health and safety have been fully in forefront about how many people you're allowed in the chamber COVID safe. Now, members may agree or disagree with a number of 30 in our council chamber, but that is the officer's advice that we're receiving, and that is the officer's advice that we're going along with. And there is a playoff. Yes, you could hire a larger venue, sports hall or whatever, and have a socially distant meeting of full council, but it wouldn't be streamed. We would not be streaming the meetings, and something I think that we might agree on is that streaming has been a good thing for this council, getting the democratic action out into the community so that the public can see what we're up to. And we could have some form of camera, some form of video, and maybe play the tape back at some other time on the web, but it is quite expensive to hire in external AV kit if you're going to try to run a fully fledged streamed meeting from premises other than the council chamber. And I can assure you that has been discussed long and hard. And finally, I absolutely agree with Councillor Linden and others about the responsibility of members in all of this. Let's remember that if every member in the council decided to exercise their right to speak on any item on an agenda, every agenda item would take 2 hours, at least. So obviously it is up to members and groups and group leaders to ensure that there is a proper debate and a full debate, but a reasonable debate within the timescale we have available. So yes, let's absolutely. The reason that 2 options were put before you is for you to decide whether you want to put both forward or just one of them. So let us have a meeting of the group leaders, finance officers, chairman of council to thrash out a timetable. And I would suggest that what we might well end up with is the chairman having published a timetable for the meeting so that we've got some idea what has been discussed between the leaders about where the items on the agenda ought to arise in the evening. And then it will be very much a matter for members to try to work to that in order that we get a proper and full budget debate. We discuss everything that needs to be discussed. We vote on everything that needs to be voted on. But at the end of the day, we set a budget. Thank you, members.
Thanks, Councillor Bridgman. I'm going to let Joseph come in first, and I've been made aware that Councillor Beck wants to come in, and there are still 1 or 2 other members who want to come in the room. So I'll let Joseph come in, and then we'll go to Councillor Beck.
Thanks, Chairman. And I just want to pick up actually on Councillor Moore's point around, could we do the revenue budget first? The reason for the timing of the 4 papers as articulated in this proposal is because if we did not the revenue budget first and some of the other items, they may well, if members approve that amendment, have a consequential impact on the revenue budget. And it's in the revenue budget is where you're changing the council tax level. So that has to be the final one. So for example, if you had like a capital scheme, you wanted to build a new school somewhere and it would cost X million pounds, that would have an impact on the revenue budget. So if we did the revenue budget first, you'd approve it, then there'd be an amendment, then we'd have to go back into the revenue budget again to reapprove it. So that's why there's sort of choreography of the papers there to try and avoid that reapproval issue.
Thanks, Joseph. Like I said, Councillor Beck, if you'd like to speak next.
Thank you, Chairman. I would like to second the proposal put forward by Councillor Masters with regard to 7.3, that we recommend the council approve the proposals detailed in section 2 of this report. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Beck. Councillor Rolls.
Yeah, I just wanted to pick up on one point that Councillor Bridgman mentioned about the whole point about attendance being outside the scope of this report. I'm not sure I entirely agree with that, because I was responding to a comment that Sarah Clark made in terms of going on after 10:30. But also, if we're going to look at proposals around how much time you have to debate things and how many people are able to do that, I think it is relevant that we look at actually who is in the room and who is not in the room. However, and I will just say this because I think this point does need to be picked up on and continue the dialogue to be continued. I appreciate lots of discussions around it, but if COVID is here to stay and we have to live with it, I think we do need to draw the line somewhere where we try and get back to some sense of everybody being in the room. Otherwise, the hybrid situation may continue for many, many years to come, and I don't think that's acceptable to the public. Thank you.
Councillor Cotton.
Yes, just for clarification, proposal and seconding is for that of proposal 2 as shown on page 27.
I was going to actually ask my own clarification on, because obviously it says we need proposal and seconder for the recommendations. Are we going to need a proposal and seconder for each separate recommendation, or just for all of them, and then we kind of play it as by ear as we go along with the rest?
I think we can do it en bloc, but within the recommendations, it does ask this committee to decide whether to recommend either option C or option D. So it is asking that only one of those go to full council. So, and I think somebody had made that comment. So the proposal is that in effect the report will be amended following this to reflect the recommendation of this committee, be that the kind of option 1 or option 2.
Okay, thank you, Sarah. Does that answer your question, Councillor?
Yeah, nearly.
Can I?
Yeah, of course.
Sorry, just to respond to some of the points that have been raised. It may be academic, but in response to Councillor Jones's comments around managing time in terms of the blocks, the proposal was that it would be on group, so it's en masse. So each group would be given their time, and then you would just go through that entire process. So that it would be introduced. The proposal was that it would be introduced by the administration, then followed by the main opposition party, then the minority opposition party, and then the administration. And then you would take a sequence of votes at the end of that. So I would have hoped that would have assisted in that kind of managing it. It would then be for the groups to manage their kind of block time, as it were. In terms of the votes and the proposals as they are, I think that the thing to bear in mind with the Budget Council meeting is that's where there is kind of legislative requirements around the manner of voting and the need to have them as named votes. So voting at the Budget Council meeting can also become a protracted event. So if we were to take separate named votes on each of the proposals within the amendments, that again could take a significant amount of time during the meeting. So the chairman has that discretion now to allow some, and that's a matter for the chairman following a request from the proposer of an amendment. Just in terms of the venue, I think just to repeat what Councillor Bridgman said, we have followed the advice. I think we have challenged the advice as well, quite rigorously. And I think the comments that Councillor Rolls has made regarding what we saw in Parliament and then what we're being told does kind of raise that challenge. So that challenge has been put out to both the health and safety team and our public health colleagues, and they are aligned in the advice that they're giving us. So that's the advice that we have followed to date. And then the final point was just the point that Councillor Cottam had requested clarification on, which is that we are seeking a proposal from this committee for one of the options.
Okay, thank you, Sarah. I've got Councillor Linden and then Councillor Bridgman, and I'd like to move to a conclusion on this. So Councillor Linden.
Yeah, just as an explanation, certainly what I was seeing is that I fully support the limit in this chamber, but we move it elsewhere for our council meetings to allow us not to have indicative votes. But the confusion I've got is, are we going to have a vote between proposal 1 and 2? Because I think it's quite clear that the members of the committee want to move to proposal 2. I just want some clarification, please, on that.
So my assumption on how it would work was we'd have a proposer and a seconder for all the recommendations. We would vote separately on each recommendation, and then when it comes to a choice between Appendix C and Appendix D, we would vote on the first one. I think by the the way the meeting's gone, it seems pretty clear what people want, but we'd have to vote on both of them, do we?
No, I think so. So actually, I would be comfortable if I think Councillor Linden has made a proposal regarding the recommendations, then actually if he would like to clarify to accept the recommendations with the clarity that it is option D rather than the proposal, I think it's an Appendix D. So option 2, which is the softer sort of framework, then actually you can take one vote and accept all of those recommendations.
Okay, great, that's clear.
I would agree with Mrs. Clark to put that proposal forward.
We'll go to Councillor Bridgman, then we'll move to that. So yeah, Councillor Bridgman, you've got the last word on this.
Thank you. Two very quick points. Firstly, on the question of number in the chamber, I think, and Mrs. Clark will correct me if I'm wrong, that it is anticipated that December's meeting will continue to be a 30 in the chamber proportionate, but that we will obviously have discussions about how we achieve the budget meeting in 3 months beyond that. So leave that with those who are discussing it. And on the this is a question I asked Mrs. Clark, and I wonder if she's actually got an answer for me, is on the question of named voting, because of course the microphone voting is effectively a named vote. It identifies who's voted which way if you use the microphones. And if we treat it as a named vote, it will speed up named voting no end.
So do you want to quickly respond to that?
Yeah, so it is certainly hope that the technology will assist that process. I think at this point, as I've said before, I don't have 100% confidence in the technology, and I know some of the members at the last council meeting were having issues. So
Yeah,
I think
myself included, I think.
So I think that is certainly, we are looking at all of these technologies and where there is the opportunity to make things more efficient. We are certainly, that is the direction of travel. And I think at this point, I am planning, to ensure that we have an approved budget and that we can do that lawfully. So, and hopefully with the assistance of technology.
Great, thank you, Sarah. Councillor Burke, I saw that you, sorry, I'll come to you in a second, Councillor Moss. I saw you raise your hand. Was that to add anything further, or was it to second Councillor Linden's?
I'm just
proposal?
really purely trying to clarify that we are totally covering the situation with regard to the budget meeting in March each year. Because we haven't been talking about that, and so there are two things to deal with.
Sorry, can you just explain that again? Sorry,
Sorry, the first thing which we debated was the question of the March meeting every year to be solely for the budget. And I think we need a vote on that as well as the further decision.
So I think the proposal is that every year there will be 2 full council meetings during March.
Yeah.
So this year, what we're proposing, and that the proposal goes to council for it to be determined, is that the meeting that's currently scheduled for the 3rd of March will become the budget meeting and will be subject to these rules.
Yeah.
And that a meeting following that, there will be a further meeting following that also in March. It will have to take place before April because there are other reports that we need to have in place by the 1st of April. So we're currently discussing dates, and by the time this report appears for council, we will have the proposed second budget meeting date in there. But going forward, and also on the agenda for the December council meeting will be next year's timetable of meetings, and that will have the 2 meetings in March. So it will reflect this then going forward.
Yep, Councillor Masters.
Thank you, Chairman. Through you, Chairman, to Mrs. Clark. Just a question of clarification. In terms of the council chamber for the meetings and the limits that we have, is there any scope and flexibility in the legislation that those members excluded for health and safety reasons cannot be in the council building in another room? Is that off limits?
Members can absolutely, and we are currently kitting out the other rooms to have kind of better video conferencing technology. So, and I think certainly on the earlier meetings, we had the Roger Crofton committee room also set up. So members can go into those rooms. What we can't do, it's having reviewed the judgment, is have those members classed as being part of the meeting, because we actively, we had assumed that what we may be able to do is to call the meeting at the council offices, and then basically have members deployed around the building and us all connect in effect via the technology. But the judgment in effect makes that a kind of an unacceptable proposal. So the members of the meeting need to be in the room. In effect,
can I ask Councillor Bridgman, because I'm pretty sure he's probably been as involved as Mrs. Clark. What representations have been made to try and challenge that?
I don't think anyone has decided to challenge. Hertfordshire decided not to challenge the judgment, not to take it to appeal. There is that the government have invited evidence. I think we have submitted evidence. The LGA is certainly, I saw, Mrs. Clark will be able to say about a survey we've just engaged with to push back. There is a lot of pushback from all sorts of bits of the local government family, if I can put it like that, on the question of the remote and hybrid and whatever else meetings to enable, principally to enable this type of meeting to take place. And for example, if I was a member of the committee, for me to have a legitimate vote in the meeting. and Mrs. Clark is as close to this as I am, but I think that's certainly where I believe the land lies at the moment. But as and when the government will get its finger out and do something about the legislation, well, you know as well as I do, Councillor Masters, that how long is a piece of string?
So you don't have much confidence that common sense, as scarce as common sense is these days, will prevail ultimately?
Oh, I think I am sure common sense will prevail ultimately. The question is, what is ultimate? What date is ultimate?
Thank you, Chairman.
Okay, thank you, members. I'm not going to repeat a lot of what people said. I'm going to just very quickly say what I wanted to say, because I'm not going to repeat anything that's been said too much. I'm also in favour of the options laid out in Appendix D, so I'm glad we're going in that direction. I'm very happy with the direction of the recommendations as a whole. All I would say about the cut-off point is if we are having a specific budget meeting, which is also potentially going to start earlier at 5:30 and end at potentially 10:45, I think that's probably plenty of time. So I wouldn't be in favour of any sort of further extensions to that, or having any additional meetings, but that's just me. So Councillor Linden has proposed the recommendations as set on pages 19 and 20 with the option as set out in Appendix D to be, the option we go with for D. So does anyone going to second that?
It was Councillor Masters proposed that and seconded by Councillor Beck.
Okay, sorry. So Councillor Masters proposed, and Councillor Beck, you want to second that?
Correct.
Okay, great. So could all members in the room indicate they're in favour in that by raising their hands?
Thank you, Chairman. I can confirm that has been carried.
Great, thank you. So of course, Councillor Moore. Thank you for joining us this evening. Thank you. And Councillor Rolls, sorry, as well.
Yeah, could I just ask, whilst we're on the subject of constitutional updates, because when I read that, I thought it was going to be an update on where the task force was. And I know Councillor Moore raised this. Is there a further update on the constitutional review at a later in the work programme somewhere else?
Certainly I can bring a further report back detailing the further timetable. So I'm happy to do that, and whether I'll get that done for the January meeting, I think certainly, and I know Councillor Bridgman is very keen that we bring that back as soon as possible. I think we brought a report through to G&E, I can't remember when that was, showing that the direction and the style that we're now moving towards, and we have almost now completed all of the meetings in effect that have gone into that new format, and hopefully I think, as I said at the last meeting, having agreed the new format, it is hoped that we will kind of make swifter progress now, because really that it was that has taken the time to kind of decide how we wanted the format to be. So if members would want a further detailed update, I'm certainly happy to bring back a kind of an indicative timetable to the next meeting.
I would certainly welcome that. I think with these things, I mean, the fact that we've had to sort of separately debate the budget meeting, to my mind, is because we need to change the constitution, obviously. So there may be other things that, rather than keep sort of piecemeal bringing it back, I think an overall timescale, and having been on a task force myself with you, I know how long these things can take. So I just think even if we had some kind of idea framework, I think it'd be incredibly helpful for everyone.
Yeah. I think certainly the hope is that we can bring the first tranche of substantive amendments through in the near future. Yeah, I will try to bring something back for the January meeting with a kind of an indicative timetable.
Thank you for that. So we'll move on to item 7, the action plan update report for the review of the effectiveness of the Governance and Ethics Committee. I've got Shiraz to introduce my briefing, but I'm assuming you're going to do that for us. So.
I think Joseph has kindly agreed to introduce
Joseph,
this report.
Take it away, Joseph.
Thank you very much, Chairman. So this report is just an update on a couple of the actions that are outstanding and that have changed. And this is mainly, there's a link here to the first paper, item 5 that we discussed earlier. And there's been a change due to the outcome of the Redmond review. So the government commissioned this review to have a look at local government auditing and reporting. And Originally, it was proposed to have an annual report go from this committee to full council. It still is, but the Redmond review looks like it's going to come in and mandate that from 21-22, alongside a report from our external auditors as well at full council, which is quite a shift. Normally, and external auditors will still be coming to this meeting, but in future it's proposed that they actually come along to the full council meeting as well. I'm not sure exactly which, but hopefully they should come along accompanied by a report from this committee as well on its review of effectiveness and the key issues and tasks that it's undertaken during the year.
Thank you, Joseph. Are there any members who want to speak on this? Can't see any in the room. So as the recommendation is set on page 39 is to note the report only, there's no need to vote on the item. So that brings us to the closing of the meeting. Business is now concluded. Thank you, all of you who've been present in the room and on Zoom attending the meeting. Our next meeting is scheduled for the 17th of January 2022. Can I request that members remain seated until the host has confirmed that the meeting is no longer being live streamed?